This is a space to empower, inspire, and motivate you on your own journey. Today's Sacred Wild, I am with Chris Park, a druid and beekeeper. So welcome, Chris. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thanks for the
So,
invitation.
so just to get started, can you just tell us a bit about how you got into beekeeping and what you're passionate about?
Oh, how did I get into beekeeping? I first saw a beehive when I was at art college in my, when I was sort of 19, 20, 21. As a young man, my girlfriend at the time, we would often go and stay at her parents' place down in in Battle in Sussex. And that was my first introduction to a beehive. And looking at Fred and everything he did, I thought, wouldn't it be great one day to have a small holding like this and to keep bees and and make and do lots of home cooking and home produce and all these things. I wasn't so
Mm.
impressed with the geese, even though I love geese. They're a bit aggressive, and so it just stuck in my mind. And I always thought, oh, one day if I ever settle down, I will keep bees. And eventually, I was sort of getting into witchcraft and trained in the craft, and then trained in druidry. And at the heart of druidry and music and song and arts, and there's these divine brews like the brew of Awen of Jones Cauldron, and the mead of inspiration from the ancient traditions, and the mead of poetry from the Norse traditions, and the great Soma from the ancient Indian traditions, and the Vedic and the Hindu traditions, and the always different drinks of Mount Olympus as well, inspiring prophecy and poetry. So of course, mostly in the native British traditions and Irish traditions, you have the mead horn that circles round at the end of the ceremony. May you never thirst and may you never hunger, and it's medicine. So it's like this again, right at the heart of these traditions, of these white wisdom traditions, is leading a healthy lifestyle, physical health, mental health, being expressive in the arts, and being competent in the physical realm of growing and food and medicine and nature and stretching into the other world at the same time, into those mystical magical places, and sort of wiggling its way through all of these traditions was the sort of little honeybee. And
Mm.
I'll never forget, I was in an antique shop in Newcastle Emlyn. So my mum was born in Wales, and her grandma was Welsh. Her mum was Welsh. My grandmother was Welsh, and so I was following these ancestral routes around Wales and living in Wales. And there's this lovely pair of horns, sort of mounted for like 20 quid in this antique shop, maybe 40 years ago or something ridiculous. So I bought it, and I turned one of them into a kind of musical instrument, like a trumpet horn, and the other one I carved and turned into a mead horn. So I would take that to druid camps and druid events and ceremonies, and Stonehenge and Glastonbury Tour and those things. And I eventually took it into an Iron Age village where I was in. This was in the winter of 2000, the wettest autumn on record. It's still the wettest autumn on record. And I was living there as a volunteer in an Iron Age village for 7 weeks with 17 people, 17 of us, living like Iron Age people. And I loved it. I didn't become a druid to recreate the past. I became a druid because it was a contemporary nature-based spirituality. And I wasn't interested in recreating the past. But through this experience, I realized how precious all these skills were of building Iron Age roundhouses, knowing about thatching and about curing skins and tanning hides and making charcoal and making iron and making baskets and milking goats and making cheese and growing and grinding wheat into flour, making bread and making bread ovens, and just all these, keeping a fire going, and all these fine arts that we seem to be losing as the more mechanized we become as a species.
Mm.
And so it's a real coming home experience. And part of that experience was brewing this cider, you would call it. It's like this apple, load of crab apples juiced up in a big vat with honey and stirring it all up and brewing this delicious drink. Because we didn't have sugar, we didn't have any sweets, we didn't have any potatoes or crisps, or there's no our if we're yearning for a snack, it was homemade, and it was generally spelt wheat boiled up with some goat's milk with some honey, which is all
Mm.
all three of those things are like amazing foods. And then we might make some sweetbreads, flatbreads, and things like that. So, and a bit of foraging, blackberries in the autumn, and apples, of course. They were sour crab apples. So it just stuck in my mind coming out at the end of that project. It stuck in my mind. Well, uh, we had honey, and it was a real fun for us, and a real um, tonic for us. Sort of, it's a celebratory. Yeah, we've got something to drink, and we would, be making ceremonies and telling stories in the evening, and passing around the foaming mead horn.
Yeah.
So I just came out of that project to the farm where I live now, and I'm still here. And that was what 26 years ago, 25 years ago, and I'm still here now. I had a bit of itinerary, a few transient years at the beginning, but I ended up staying here and keeping bees here. And another druid moved in for a while, JJ, who had been a beekeeper at one time, and we were studying herbs. Like once a month, we'd study a different herb, and then we were studying minerals, and once a month we'd study a different mineral. And through that, we got into the Bohemian star law, which is ancient star law from Hermes and Cornelius Agrippa, these ancient grimoires that show you these sigils of stars and how each star corresponds to a particular mineral and a particular herb. And we studied the planets and of course all the stories. And then it got to this point, body of work, where we were going through this group of stars, studying one a month, and we'd gather at the dark of the moon, where you're more likely to have a clear sky, unpolluted from bright moonlight, where you can see more stars. And each month we would go away and do our own research of the folklore and the astronomy, and come back and share what we'd learned, and then go out into the sacred grove. Over the years, many druids and different people of different traditions have come here and planted trees in the sacred grove, and we'd sometimes kindle a fire there, sometimes not, but we'd attune and make a ceremony to be with the energy and of what this particular star that we've been working with that month. So we began to view the night sky as one giant beehive, like a big domed hive. And JJ, he used to keep bees years ago at Highgrove, and he gave up when the varroa mite came to the UK because all of his bees died out. But he still had his kit, and one day he just came over with his friend, and he brought some beehives and some beekeeping equipment and some amazing books. This brilliant book called The Archaeology of Beekeeping, which is just so inspiring. And at the time I was building coracles and Iron Age roundhouses and curing skins and working more deeply with like natural crafts and primitive technologies. And so I began to make these domed skeps, these ancient alveary beehives from the willow coppice here, and from thatching straw, and split bramble and split willow and cane lapping. And
Mm.
then I started to make other kind of recreated sort of experimental archaeology into beekeeping, looking to the past and look to the future, thinking, well, these ancestral indigenous traditions of beekeeping, why was doing that, and why there's a lot of problems in current beekeeping because of the movable frame hive and because of all the diseases that spread around through the modern practices and through the stress, and the biggest vector for bee disease and bee stress is the beekeeper, and how bee breeding has changed bees and how it's all done for profit, and how honey is adulterated today. And I just like thinking, well, maybe some babies were thrown out with the bathwater. And I had this epiphany: I need to start keeping bees in these old-fashioned ways. And I couldn't find anyone to teach me, so I just began to look at archaeology and ancient books, and started to do it, and started to make skeps. and I discovered that skept beekeeping is really rare in this country, and that it's illegal in some countries. It's what you call fixed comb. So behind me is a skep without bees in, but it's what you call fixed comb. So it's wild comb that the bees make themselves. It's really healthy. There's no wax foundation put in there that might have traces of recycled chemicals or adulterated waxes and other things in there. Bees make it all themselves, and I found out that most bees that are kept by beekeepers in the world are still kept in this style, in some kind of container that's naturally made of locally sustainable organic materials by the beekeepers themselves. And bees do all the work themselves in it. And that bees that are kept in that way, that are freely allowed to swarm and never treated with chemicals, are the healthiest bees in the world. Because a lot of honey in the supermarket isn't honey. it's,
Mm,
it's, it's a
yeah.
it's rice syrup and glucose, and but they're getting really clever at making it. And I think you can look at all foods. I think honey is the third most adulterated food on the planet. The first is olive oil, the second is milk, and then it's honey. And so when we started to outsource our food, our clothing, our entertainment, our spirituality, then life got worse because businesses and capitalism cut corners for profit. So it's, rather than just sinking into I don't know, but I'm not saying life is worse today. I think there's a lot of things that have got much much better and safer and easier for human beings. But there's also a balance, isn't there? It's a double-edged sword, and but I think it's really wise to be able to understand and work with and be a part of and feel that belonging to nature and we'll do it in different ways. And my way of doing it is through beekeeping and natural crafts and folk tales and druidry and witchcraft
Mm.
and medicine, the hive and things like that.
I
Lots of
think
ways to
more
be in the
people,
world.
yeah, I think more people are stepping out in that way now as well and becoming more interested in like natural crafts and natural health, and just like a natural lifestyle. Um,
Yeah, I think there always has been. There's always been this sort of counterculture. You can see it, back through history of people getting back into nature when the Industrial Revolution happened. People getting back into nature in the 60s and 70s, and people, so there've always been people that have realised that we're losing folklore, or we're losing skills, or we're losing healthy pursuits. Or before TV and radio, you just used to go to the pub and everybody would just join in with songs. This was, when people say, "Oh, where are our medicine songs?" and stuff like that. So what used to be in the pub, that's what it was.
yeah,
Or around the kitchen table, at the Cayley, and people just go around each other's houses, or go to the local pub, and someone would start a song, everyone would join in the chorus, and once you've
yeah,
been going for a couple of years of your life, you'd know them and just perpetuate them, and that's just how it was. And the
mm,
radio, overtook that at work. As soon as radios happened, and it was piped music, and people shut up and just got on with their job. and
yeah,
TV, but we're here now on a screen, aren't we? And we love it, but if we were, we'd hopefully be engaging
in
with our nearest
person.
and yeah,
Yeah. Well, I went on one of your pilgrimages and I
yes,
first-hand experienced what you were talking about with your horn and your mead.
that's right. Yeah, great, yeah,
And I loved
yeah. It's
it.
like the
And I
ancient blue
thought,
jab. You loved it.
but yeah, well, it was a really nice way to kind of bring things into the present moment, and get people engaged as well. So,
Of course,
um,
yeah. So it's sensual, isn't it? You get to carry this. You get to hold this heavy thing. It's quite heavy when it's full, and then you get to it's communal because you're receiving it to someone else and passing it on. It's tasty. It's inspiring,
mm,
olfactory. Yeah, yeah. It's a.
well,
I guess
well, I
on a
think
pilgrimage, you can sometimes be a spectator if you're listening to stuff. But yeah,
yeah, yeah,
multi-sensory, isn't
100%.
it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's quite interesting how like mead was kind of your catalyst to getting into beekeeping and druidry, and those combining
Well,
together.
it will have a lot of factors involved. I mean, one is you spend a lot of time outdoors, so that's great. Beekeepers are always getting covered in propolis, which is nature's antibiotic. Often getting stung, which is really good for your blood, and reduces tumors. It's good for your smooth muscles and your skeletal system, good for your nervous system, good for your immune system, immunomodulatory. It's antiviral, and of course we have real honey rather than fake honey. So that's such a good medicine. It's got this slow release energy in your body, and it's just again antimicrobial and a tonic. And we have bee pollen and beehive air and the humming of the bees and just the energy of the bees. So there's lots of factors involved as to why.
So how do you think bees help with the ecosystem and ecology as well, and why they're so important? Because I know that there has kind of been um, kind of chemical sprays that have reduced bee activity and bee life.
They've
So,
been here for a long, long time, and they don't always compete because their tongues are shorter than your average bumblebee and moth and butterfly. You'll never see a honeybee on a purple buddleia bush, but it'll be covered in other bees and butterflies. You'll never see a honeybee on red clover, for example, and you rarely see it on the lucerne, like the alfalfa. But they'll be covered in hundreds of other species of insect, and so they don't pollinate, but they don't compete as much as people think, and they are native pollinators as well. Whatever they have been bred with other strains of bees, but honeybees are native. And if anything, we're at fault for destroying wildflower meadows and verges and organic land and forests and building parking lots and spraying fields with herbicides and pesticides. It's up to us to be guardians of nature and to be stewards for organic land and rivers with clean water and, and riverbanks full of forage. And wildland, if you let a piece of land go wild, it's full of plants that are brilliant for bees. Like it would be covered in brambles, which is a really, really important plant for bees, and thistles, which are really important for bees. But also all these and hawthorn trees will start to grow up, which bees love. And the blackthorn trees, all these native things that people consider to be weeds or to be are absolutely perfect for honeybees and all bees. And it's up to us to ensure that there's enough land so that pollinators and other species have places and forage, and not to complain about one single species. Just like any species, its health and well-being largely depends on its environment, organic land, clean water, for all of us.
hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's like the natural law of order is when we create an environment for other things to grow naturally, then we receive from that as well. So,
Yeah. I
if,
mean,
if we are
yeah,
looking
of
after
course. I mean,
our
cultivation is
environment.
is of course important. Absolutely, but cultivation is important. Of course, it's important to sustain us, and there's a yeah, there's a fine balance, isn't there? Or a wise balance somewhere amongst amongst it all. Woodland is so important. A tree full of blossom is like a meadow for a honeybee and other bees. Like the lime trees are flowering at the moment; they're humming with bees. So letting mature trees are really important, and trees you wouldn't expect, like the sycamore tree. The bees will be all over that when it's flowering. Oak trees and holly trees too. When they're flowering, bees love that. And
I like
yeah,
making,
these isles used to be called the honey. Sorry.
I was going to say, I like making blackberry jam. And
Yeah,
yeah, and at the moment,
but you'll be
my
using refined white sugar, I'm sure.
no. I at the moment there's all the flowers out, Because obviously it's not the time
Yeah.
of year for
Yeah.
the berries yet, but all the flowers are out and I can see all the bumblebees pollinating them. And it's just like so great because I'm like, thank you, thanks for doing your job so I can get my berries.
Yeah. Yeah. Blackberries, delicious, aren't they?
Yeah.
Bees flipping from flower to flower. The borage is flowering at the moment as well, and it's an important bee plant. So much, all of it. And just like us, they really benefit from a, a varied diet to feed their young and give their young a good start in life with the pollen and
Mm,
nectar from these plants and trees.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important for our lifestyle, especially if we're going back to nature
Yeah,
and our nutrition and our diet as well.
yeah.
Um,
And
but you,
bees are bioindicators too. That the microplastics were found inside honeybees a few years ago. Up at Dounreay, the decommissioned nuclear centre in Scotland, bees produced some sort of radioactive honey that has had over the sort of normal limit of radiation in it. So they're important bioindicators, and uh,
mm,
even bees have been taken into space. Some of them have been able to adapt to
mm,
zero gravity and be able to fly and build honeycomb.
yeah,
And with these recent moon missions, they're even thinking about beeswax as a kind of safely transportable and efficient rocket fuel. So
wow,
all throughout, our ape ancestors were honey hunters, and our closest relatives, chimpanzees and orangutans, still hunt honey. So our relationship, we've been bothering bees and stealing their produce for a long, 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 long time, and we're still doing it and thinking about future ways to do it. But the you know the beekeeper's kind of transaction is you give them a good home, you protect them from their pests and their predators and potential disease, and in exchange for some of their produce, in exchange for
yeah,
some honey and a bit of propolis and pollen and beehive air is a therapy. I've built a beehive air therapy room here where people can lay down on top of the bees and breathe in the beehive air, which is really good for us and is negatively charged, so it neutralizes any free radicals and positive ions in us, which are bad for us. And of course, the bee venom is really good for you if you're not allergic. Everything that comes out of a beehive is medicinal.
I love that what you're saying about the beehive room.
Yeah, it's it looks like a sauna from the inside, and it's got these two banks of bee beds where you lie down on top of the bees. You can hear them. There's micro vibrations, and the room is filled up with this sweet, spicy air. This honeyed air and aerosols from the propolis, and there are a couple of masks that are connected directly to hives where you can breathe deeply of the beehive air, and it's
Mm,
such a relaxing, delicious therapy. It's being
yeah,
used in Poland in psychiatric hospitals and improving the mental health of patients there because of the sound of the beehives and the vibrations. It's been used for a long time in Slavic cultures, and it was researched in the 80s in Austria by the Hutzner family, who realized they were recovering from the common cold a lot quicker when they were living in the bee houses up in the mountains when they're beekeeping. And yeah, there's a lot of salubrious substances and prophylactic tactics. We're surrounded by healthy things as beekeepers.
yeah. That's amazing. It seems like they have so many like medicinal properties that can help our health and wellness. And also, I just wanted to touch on something that you mentioned earlier about if God or goddess did exist, they would create the bee. And I find that quite fascinating as well because of the sacred geometry of the honeycombs.
Well,
Do you know
what
anything
wasps did
about
it
that?
first. But yeah, we always kind of revere the bee and hate the wasp and the hornet, don't we? But actually, bees have descended from wasps, and the wasps made these hexagonal uh, geometry first, but they did it with pulped wood, paper. In fact, if the Chinese hadn't studied hornets, to see how they were making and pulping wood to make their paper nests, we wouldn't have paper today. We'd still be writing on vellum
Oh,
or
oh
or,
wow.
or wax. Or the Romans again. The Romans used wax tablets, didn't they, to write on the stylus? So there's another bee inspired bit of writing going on there. They're just everywhere, aren't they? There's this mysterious, mellifluous history of us and bees and how they've been slowly guiding our evolution.
Yeah, and they're such a small creature, but they make such a big impact.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not all sweetness and light. There's darkness and venom as well. But even the venom, the pain and the heat is really good for us. If we're not allergic, it's a really good medicine. A few years ago, it was seen to kill, breast cancer cells outright. It is really useful in many different conditions and again as just a kind of prophylactic as a tonic. Beekeepers
Mm.
get stung, and in the COVID pandemic, the Hubei province beekeepers made a survey right at the beginning of the outbreak of all their beekeepers, and they got data back from 5,115 beekeepers, and none of them had any symptoms. All of them were asymptomatic, and some of them were working right in the heart of Wuhan city as apotherapists, and them and their clients were asymptomatic when the clients' family members had symptoms. So there's this strong, powerful. That's the kind of sharp end of
Yeah.
apitherapy is the bee venom, and the kind of lighter end is like the royal jelly and beeswax creams and balms and salves, and then there's the honey, of course, and the propolis, which is a miracle substance. And bees collect propolis from
Yeah.
trees.
Propolis is
It's the immune
amazing.
system of the tree, the
I
wax.
take it whenever
Yeah,
I feel under the weather. I take propolis
good for
and
you.
it
Yeah,
sorts me out. It's like just a natural antibiotic, isn't it?
it is. Yeah, it's nature's antibiotic. It's to be called the Russian antibiotic. And bees are really, again, they've been around such a long time, so many millions of years. It's unfathomable. But they've honed this ability to take some of the healthiest substances from nature, like nectar and pollen and the tree resins and waxes, and they actually improve them in the hive and make them even better. Yeah, they're miraculous creatures. Wherever you find honeybees, there is health. That's an old Latin quote attributed to Pliny the Elder: "Ubi apis, ibi salus." Wherever there are bees, there is health.
I love that. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for talking to me today, Chris. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge sharing.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for listening. Mm.
Oh, I feel like you're a true wisdom keeper, a wisdom beekeeper.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I can be just as foolish as the next guy, but yeah, hopefully a bit of the wisdom rubs off on us, doesn't it? When
Yeah.
we're sort of immersed in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.